Hello and welcome to a video which we will deep dive into the world of weathering steam locomotives. Yeah, I was invited down to a railway company in south of Sweden called Skånska Järnvägar to have a look at the E2 type steamer. They run this steamer in regular traffic, so it's a bit of a difference compared to the museum locals, which are always in primary condition, rolling out from the roundhouses. This is more authentic state of locomotives. And as said, we have this E2 is also available as a model in HO scale from Lilliput. And I'm putting up a link where you can find this model in a shop called MJ Hobby. They have it in stock, so if you're interested and you like the locomotive, don't hesitate, get over to MJ Hobby and purchase one. Now let's have a look at this locomotive and what it looks like.
Here is the E2 steamer locomotive model from Lilliput, standing on the coupling rods on the actual E2 locomotive down in south of Sweden. A good idea when purchasing a new locomotive for your layout is to try it out on the tracks to make sure that everything is working properly before you start altering the locomotive. So we're starting this on old M-rail in the yard here next to the concrete factory. And yeah, we're trying first see that the drivetrain works properly. So let's check out some slow driving characteristics. And then we're going for trials in the turnouts, which for the old type Märklin tracks sometimes is an issue. But for this steamer it was not an issue, at least not in that direction. So we're trying in reverse, reversing the E2 out on the siding, and it seems to be working flawlessly. With the slow driving characteristics checked as well as the turnout performance, I typically run it around the layout once just to make sure. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to install a smoke generator. Now, the locomotives can be ordered with smoke generator pre-installed. So, you know, this installation here was really messy. So, if you want smoke generator, I recommend you to order the locomotive with the generator pre-installed. Here it is then. I got it to work finally and got all of the stuff together again. Let's now have a look at the real locomotive presented by Jonas Andreasson. This E2 steamer behind me here is in daily traffic, meaning that it has the dirt in all the right spots compared to museum locomotive, which typically are polished and in premium condition. One of the most characteristic weatherings on this type of locomotives is the spray of corrosion and water which comes from the spinning wheel and ends up both underneath here and along the boiler in both directions. So we're gonna represent this using a acrylic paint. So this is a burnt umber brown, and I'm adding the same type of corrosion in streaks in all direction on the lower part of the boiler. Back here we have the firebox, and around this area, which is very hot during operation, it all gets very corroded in combination with the spray from the wheels. The weathering effect is made in the same manner using burnt umber brown. Another characteristic for this engine or locomotive is the chalk streaks. The source for these are leaking water pipes or valves. The water will run along the boiler, and since the boiler is very hot, the water will turn into steam and only leave the chalk behind. These chalk runnings is creating using white acrylic paint and a very thin brush. Use only a tiny amount of paint on your brush. The bolts and the arrangement around the coupling rods are heavily lubricated on all of these steamers. This gives effect both on the wheels and also on the rod itself around these joints, and in between dryer. To create this effect, I'm using grimy oil, which is an oil paint from 502 Uptilone. This paint gives a kind of satin surface of brownish oil and grime. Another interesting weathering effect is how the suspension springs works on the tender, because the tender can be empty and have no weight at all. Well, it can also be fully loaded with both coal and water, so these blade springs have really a tough work. Now you can see here that the corrosion is running from the spring down onto the chassis underneath here, while the area around the moving parts are oily and wet. To create this effect, I'm applying a wash which contains from 1 part burnt umber brown and 9 part thinner. Now, once dry, I paint the spring blade springs in brown and also these streaks underneath. Another important point to weather is the brake pads. These typically become very hot during operation and they bind corrosion to them, so they get a kind of light brown reddish color like this. To duplicate this on our model, I'm painting the brake pads with brown. Another interesting detail is all around footsteps and handrails like this. The footsteps are typically very dirty since you step on them, but they're also shining in the edge because they get worn when you step up and down. This is also valid for the handrails here. They are worn and therefore shiny. To duplicate this, I'm using gunmetal. This is a product from MIG. It has number MIG 0045. I apply very tiny amount of this on the brush, wipe most of on a piece of paper, and then I dry brush the footsteps and the rails. The walking board along the boiler is typically just dirty. So to create this on our model, I'm using a wash from burnt umber brown, 1 part, and acrylic thinner, and apply that, leave that to dry, and then I dip my makeup sponge in pastel chalk powder and apply that on top. Same goes for the top of the tender to get it a bit of a worn and grimy look. This is the compressor which powers the brake system to the cars. This typically is very oily, and on the compressor itself it gives a blank glossy surface, but on the areas here, like on this wheel, it's more of a satin finish. You can also see here that some parts are in brass, and if you like, you can paint these parts if they're included in the model. On my steamer, I choose to add gloss varnish. This is a Vallejo paint 7510, and apply that to the compressor parts and also on surrounding areas. The front of this locomotive has been recently under maintenance and been repainted, so in normal condition it does not look as clean as it does here. Movable parts like the couplings here are typically metal shine and oily. The further down you get, the more oil, and up here more satin in the color. The brake hoses are typically very dirty. This one's fixed in the upper position. That's because we have the plow applied here. So on my model I used the same wash I used for the walking boards, meaning a brown wash. I apply this both on the walking board, the buffers and the plows, like this. The buffer plates, this one's pulled the train yesterday, they are typically shiny metal, shiny in the middle, and around that center part it's a greasy area of oil and dust. The right buffer is always curved like this, whilst the left one over here is flat. To recreate this on my model, I'm kind of stippling dark brown color onto the buffers, and in the wet paint I then apply dark brown pastel chalk powder. Let that dry for a moment, then wipe it off from the center using the makeup sponge and clean the edges from any excess powder that may have stuck there. If you like, you can now seal these weathering effects using a matte varnish with airbrush over the entire locomotive. Don't forget to clean the lights and the windows afterwards. Alright, so it's time to dispatch the train for its virgin journey on the layout.
Alright, so there you have all the different spots where you can put your dirt and the corrosion chalk on the steamers. And I would say that this guide is it's a kind of general guide. You could probably apply to a number of steamers all over the world with the knowledge you get from this video and what different things are on the locomotive and where you typically find the corrosion and dirt. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Did you know that this channel is totally dependent on the patrons supporting it? This is because the view count in a niche hobby like model railroading is it cannot really fund a channel like this. You know, if I were into cooking or fashion, it wouldn't be a problem. But for this, I need your support. So if you want to be one of the good guys, get over to Patreon. Set up a support account there from, you know, like $1, $2 per month, or make a one-off donation using the PayPal dialog found in the video description below. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and enable that little bell next to the subscription button, and you will get notification once the next video goes live. Until that happens, see you.